Welcome to the Scott Townsend Show, brought to you by Dietzo Man Productions.
Hey, this is Scott Townsend. Welcome back to the Scott Townsend Show. And today I have with me special guest, the CEO of the Frank Phillips Foundation, Bob Fraser. Bob, how's it going?
Very good, Scott. Good to be here.
Man, can't believe that we're talking about this, but the occasion for this interview is the your upcoming retirement from Woolaroc, CEO of the Frank Phillips Foundation. So it's kind of sad, but it's not really sad. I think in this episode, it would just be fun to visit with you about the 15 years, right?
Yeah.
15
right
years
at 15 years.
15 years that you've been there, changes that you've seen. So we'll just start from the beginning. Kind of give us a 35,000-foot view of how you got to Woolaroc. I know you started off, you were born and raised in Texas, but you wound up in Bartlesville. So we'll just start there.
Right. Well, at the age of 4, I think was the first time I experienced Woolaroc. My mother said that I would be in the dome room watching the lights, and took her forever to get me out of there. And I always wanted to come back. And so I fell in love with it a long time ago. And then about 16 years ago, the foundation, the board of trustees reached out to me. I had a consulting firm, and Woolaroc had just grown tired, and the mission was becoming a little blurred. And they asked if I would put together a study for them, a marketing picture of where they need to be going. And so I did that, and presented it to the board, and they loved it, and said, why don't you come to work for us and implement what you just put together? Which, as you know, is a violation of any good consultant's work, because you never want to do that, because if it fails, you want to blame the person that implemented it. Yeah.
So let me stop you there just for a second. What did you see? What did you see when you were looking at Woolaroc?
Okay, good question. It was a multitude of things. I saw a very mixed message that was being sent out. I saw a tired property, even things, Scott, like signage that was very inconsistent, things that don't seem like much, but a different font on this sign compared to this sign, and this was broken and this wasn't working anymore, but it was still there. And so, I found a place that was at that point kind of long on promises and short on delivery. And so the first thing I told them was there's a lot of work that needs to be done before we even tell the public about it. And then when the place is ready again, that's when we invite them back and let them see it. We don't want to say, here's what we're getting ready to do, because they've grown, in my opinion, a little bit leery of that. But I always saw it as a 3,700 acre magical place. And I just felt in my heart that if we did things right, and got back to the basics, that what made it special to me years and years ago could be that again, and even more so. And so I did put that plan together, and I did tell them, okay, I would go to work for them. And from that point of view, it made it very, very easy for me, because the plan that I put together for them was basically a 5-year plan, and I had price points on everything, all the physical changes that were going to be done, and bids on those, and so when they approved the plan, I came to work here October 1st of 2006, and literally was able to hit the ground running. I didn't have to go back to them and say, is this okay? And how about this? And how about that? Because they'd already put the blessing on the overall. So it was both a sprint and a marathon, and the staff enthusiastically bought into the changes because they saw the improvements that were happening. And it took some trust in our board of trustees, because here's another guy that's wanting to spend money, and gosh, I hope this pans out. But very quickly we saw the results of it. We saw the crowds picking back up, and you know how that goes. That nobody wants to write the last check. Nobody wants to be sponsoring something if it's a declining deal. So as the crowds picked back up and people started coming out and people started talking about it positively again, we saw sponsors picking back up and people willing to invest again back in what we were doing at Woolaroc. So it's those changes and improvements continued today. And back then, I remember 16 years ago, somebody saying to me, God, just love Woolaroc. The best thing about it is nothing ever changes out there. From a marketing point of view, I did not think that was a compliment. So, so we walk a fine line out here, and I always tell the staff that when we make changes, big changes in the museum, we started those in 2011, and a total transformation of a whole lot of that experience. But we got to be very, very careful that when the public comes back and walks through those doors, they know they're at Woolaroc. There's a feeling there. There's a sense of it. There's even a smell of it as you walk into the museum. And I didn't want to lose that. So we had to be able to maintain that and yet still do the things that the museum and the whole property needed so badly to be able to turn things around. But we've always tried to be very, very cognizant of how important that is. Somebody's bringing their family here and they haven't been in 20 years. You don't want them walking through the doors going, this isn't what I remember. You want them coming back here saying, God, I love this place, and my gosh, would you look at the improvements? And so that was our goal, and we've tried to stick with that.
So those who are listening, if you're in New Jersey or Ohio, wherever you are, those listening or watching, give us just give us a brief snapshot of what are we talking about? Woolaroc. What is Woolaroc?
Yeah, good question. I always assume the whole world knows it, and I shouldn't be that way. But let's go all the way back into the early 1920s. Frank Phillips, who's the founder of Phillips Petroleum Company, and the headquarters is here in Bartlesville. And by 1919, 1920, Mr. Phillips was spending about half his time in the Bartlesville office and half his time in New York City office. And he and his wife, Jane, were being entertained a lot in New York. And so they made the decision that they wanted to be able to reciprocate. And so they were going to buy a guest home, a vacation home in order to do that. So they spent about a year and a half looking in the New York City area, in Connecticut, various places on the East Coast, at existing homes, new construction. And he just didn't find anything that struck his fancy as that this is what it needs to be. He owned some property here in the Osage Hills, just outside of Bartlesville. He loved it. He thought it was very beautiful, and it is a beautiful country. And he decided this is where he was going to build his lodge home. And so in 1925, the home was built. The lodge is about 8,500 square feet. It's got 9 bedrooms, 9 baths. He built it for entertainment. He built it for business entertainment. It was a stroke of genius because he then had customers, clients, business associates visit from the West Coast, East Coast, even from
celebrities.
Europe. Yeah, lots of those. And they were seeing something that they'd never seen before. I mean, it was literally a piece of the Wild West to them. And Mr. Phillips often said, if I can get a man to Woolaroc, I can sign any deal. And he signed a lot of contracts there in the lodge. You know, I compare it, Scott, to it was like the Great Gatsby of Oklahoma. The celebrities, the parties, the politicians that were here and came as guests of Frank Phillips. So he started it that way with the lodge home. He had no real vision at that point to, you know, I want to own a museum. But in 1929, he sponsored an airplane that participated in the Dole Pineapple Race, flying from Oakland to Hawaii. And they named that plane the Woolaroc. It won the race. It came back here. He had to put it someplace. And so he told his ranch hands to build him a hangar up on the hillside. And they did, out of stone, because we got lots of that out here.
Right.
And they built the hangar. Well, that hangar is room 1 now of the museum.
Huh.
And he started collecting more art and more artifacts and more things. He really became an avid collector in the early 1930s. And so he started expanding that building. And the plane still is in the museum, but it's way back down in room 7 now. And he's got a 50,000 square foot museum of some of the best art. Christie's of New York describes it as one of the finest collections of Southwest art in the world.
There's a lot of back in those days, there were more than several people like Frank Phillips, Marlin, his brothers. It's hard to imagine the kind of money that was floating around Northeast Oklahoma back in those days when oil was just flowing and money was being made hand over fist, you know. Because you can go to Pawhuska, you can go to the Marlin, Ponca
Marlin
City,
Mansion.
Marlin Mansion, Philbrook down in Tulsa. The history, the art that was collected during this time is just absolutely phenomenal. And here we are right in the middle of nowhere, it seems like, and we've got one of the best art collections in the world.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's a good point, because it's even bigger than Woolaroc. And I try to point that out to people all the time. But the band of real estate going from the Cowboy Hall of Fame in Oklahoma City, reaching through Tulsa to Philbrook and to Gilcrease, and then to Woolaroc, and now extended a little further northeast to Crystal Bridges in Bentonville. Those are some of the finest museums in the world, and you know, they're just in our backyard.
Yeah.
And it's you know, the collections are amazing, and for so many of us that live here, we probably are guilty of taking it a little bit for granted. But yeah, it's an amazing collection.
What's your when you're referring to Frank Phillips and you're telling people about Woolaroc, what's one of your favorite Frank Phillips stories?
Oh gosh, you know, there are so many of them. But you know, he was a showman, very low key in a way, but he really truly was a showman. And you know, they would tell the stories of he would invite a group in from say the East Coast to come visit at the lodge, and so they arrived at the front gate, and he would have 3 or 4 of his ranch hands there on horseback with masks on, and at gunpoint they would rob the guests that had shown up. Now we're talking about 1927, 1928, 1929. Take their wallets, take their jewelry, take their watches. And you know, terrify them, and so they left on horseback the short direction back to the lodge, while the guests got back in their cars and rumbled their way back up here. And they arrive and they come into the lodge and they're still, terrified, and they tell Frank Phillips exactly what happened. He's sitting in the lodge, and Frank would casually point over to the table on the side, and there's the watches and the wallets and the rings and all that he had laid out there. And it was his way of welcome to Woolaroc, welcome to the Wild West. Want to give you a little taste of it. Yeah, another great story is that Franklin Roosevelt, when he was president of the United States, his politics and Mr. Phillips's politics were polar opposites. And Mr. Phillips was a strong Republican, and obviously FDR with the New Deal. Frank was not a big fan of that. Well, his son was Elliott Roosevelt, and Elliott Roosevelt was a noted hunter, very good hunter, and he wanted to come to Woolaroc and shoot a buffalo, and he let that be known that he wanted to. And Mr. Phillips said no thanks. He didn't care to have a Roosevelt here at Woolaroc. Some of his assistants pointed out to him that really, for business reasons, it might be a pretty good idea to change your mind, let Elliott come. So he did. So Elliott Roosevelt arrives at the ranch, and he's met by Griff Graham, who was Frank's ranch manager, and 8 or 9 other cowboys, and they meet him, and they take him out to the herd, and they've got a rifle ready for him. And Elliott spots a bull, and he takes aim and fires and misses. Takes aim again, fires and misses. And Griff Graham, Frank's ranch manager, grabs the rifle away from him and says, "What in the heck are you doing?" Takes aim, fires, drops the bull right there on the spot. Elliott Roosevelt is humiliated in front of all these cowboys and all that. They load back up, head back to the lodge for lunch. Mr. Phillips is sitting there waiting for him. They all sit down. Elliott's still embarrassed by what he blows it right in front of all these real live cowboys. Finally, Mr. Phillips can't hold it in any longer, and he busts out laughing, and he admits to Elliott that he had loaded the gun with 2 blanks. So, that's sort of vintage Frank Phillips. I mean, he's pulling a joke on Elliott Roosevelt, but I think he was also poking him a little bit that I don't like your dad's politics.
That's great.
But Elliott Roosevelt took it in great form. He ended up coming back several times. He and Mr. Phillips became fast friends. In fact, there's even a photograph of Elliott in the lodge, and it says, "To Mr. Frank Phillips from a very poor shot."
Thank you for joining the Scott Townsend Show. We'll be back right after this.
Pop's Daylight Donuts, man, they've got the best tasting donuts, sausage wraps, pastries in Northeast Oklahoma. And also, if you'll tell the staff there, "Hey, Scott Townsend said to give me a large spicy pig," they'll give you a free large spicy sausage wrap. But you have to tell them Scott Townsend sent you. So tell them, "Hey, Scott Townsend told me to tell you to give me a large spicy pig." So there's the offer. There's the call to action. So go to Pop's Daylight Donuts, say hi to Mark for me, and go to Pop's Daylight Donuts and get you some. The other sponsor is Castafly Outdoor Adventures.
Adventure. That's where it begins. We look to create and document our moments in time while embracing the majestic wonder and beauty of the great outdoors. Our quest is to explore the back roads of the Ozarks, camping, fishing, and just getting lost. Refresh your spirit and join us on our next adventure.
Paul and his crew invite you to subscribe to the Castafly Outdoor Adventures YouTube channel. there's so many luminaries like Roosevelt that came to Woolaroc. And, if you're, to picture Woolaroc, it's out in the middle of Osage County. There's not a lot around. Well, there's nothing around it.
No.
And yet you get the cream of the crop from the 20s, like presidents' sons, Will Rogers, Wiley Post. I'm trying to think of the other celebrities that there's pictures of.
Rudy Valley, Rubinoff, Harry Truman when he was a senator, President Herbert Hoover, Cardinal Spellman from the Catholic Church. It's a long list of who's who in the 1920s, 1930s.
Yeah. So, and you got storms going on over there? Is that what I heard?
It's the first time we've had rain in 2 months. I'm not sure what that is falling out of the sky.
I'm looking towards your direction here at my windows, and I can see storm clouds brewing. So, yeah. So we'll see how long we can keep this going. One of the things that
the Buffalo are happy.
Yeah, your help in Bartlesville with many projects. One just most recent, and I can see it looking out my window here on Cherokee, the Frank Phillips home. The home that Frank Phillips had here in Bartlesville. Kind of ran into a little bit of trouble a couple years ago. Tell us the story of what happened and how you and your crew rode in and saved the day, so to speak.
Well, it is a good story. That home was built in 1909. I consider it to be the bedrock of Bartlesville because when Mr. Phillips built that home, it sent a message out to a lot of people that he intended on staying here in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. This was his place. It's a beautiful, beautiful, majestic home. And what a lot of people didn't realize is that it was always in the name of Jane Phillips. Jane owned the home, not Frank.
Yeah.
And
didn't know that.
So she left the home with their granddaughter, Betsy. And so Jane died in 1948. Frank died in 1950. And so Betsy and her family moved in 1950 and were there until the early 1970s when they moved to the East Coast.
Huh.
And so she left the home with the state of Oklahoma, deeded it to the Oklahoma Historical Society. And to their credit, for 45 years, they did just a terrific job of maintaining the home, maintaining the property, and telling the story.
Yeah.
But as the state of Oklahoma ran out of money over the last 4, 5, 6 years, even though we were not part of the home, the administrators and directors were friends of mine. And so I knew the situation and I knew the dire straits they were in financially. It got to the point where the state of Oklahoma was no longer funding it. And so the only way they were able to operate was through donations. And that did not seem like a very good future. So I approached our board and I said, with your permission, I would like to reach out to Bob Blackburn, who was the head of the Oklahoma Historical Society, and see if they would have any interest in us taking over that property. Our board approved me to do that with the caveat, which I fully understood, of we would be willing to do so if there was a standalone endowment for that home. We don't want to spend $1 of Woolaroc money on the home because people didn't give money to Woolaroc for us to do that, which I agreed with that. So I did reach out to Bob Blackburn and had one of several meetings with the state of Oklahoma. They were very, very interested in us being able to take it over. But it was a very unique deed that Frank and Jane's granddaughter negotiated with the state of Oklahoma. It said that the home would stay in the possession of the state as long as they ran it as on a full-time basis as a museum. And if they failed to do that, it was to be turned over to the city of Bartlesville. And if the city of Bartlesville could not run it as a museum, the home was to be bulldozed. So with that a bit of information, working with the state and working with the city of Bartlesville, nobody wanted that home to be bulldozed. State of Oklahoma could not afford to maintain it, and the city of Bartlesville could not afford to maintain it and didn't want to maintain it. So it was a very logical choice that the Frank Phillips Foundation would take it under our umbrella. So again, that one caveat was if I could raise the money to do that. So, we set a target of $1 million. We wanted to raise to establish an endowment for the Frank Phillips home. And we were able to raise $1.6 million thanks to the generosity of a lot of people. And the overhead, Scott, on that operation is so small compared to something like Woolaroc, that with that $1.6 million endowment, I think it certainly preserves that home for the next 100 years easily. So we've been able to make great improvements physically to it, painting it, exterior lighting,
Right.
just a lot of things that needed to be done. And you walk through that home, it's not as big as the Biltmore, but I guarantee it rivals the Biltmore in terms of the beauty of it and the fact that 95% of the furnishings inside are the furnishings of Frank and Jane Phillips. So it's like going through a time capsule.
It really is. And I'm so glad that you guys came in and took care of it. I always thought for the longest time that it needed some attention, and I always wondered, during Christmas time, that thing should just be lit up and just, look really great. And then it went through all that. And so now you, like you said, exterior lights, the lawn's kept up, you painted it. I mean, it's one of the crown jewels of Bartlesville.
Yeah, it really is. And we try to do things with it that incorporate it with the city of Bartlesville. And, and some of them are not big things, but I mean, we do 4 or 5 music on the lawns.
Yeah,
in the
I
year.
see that. Yeah.
And, it's free of charge. We'll bring in a Christian band. We'll bring in a jazz band. We've brought in barbershop quartets. And people bring out their lawn chairs and just sit and enjoy it. And, we'll have, 200 people on the lawn in the evening. And, again, I think of the smile that would be putting on Frank and Jane Phillips' face, knowing that their home was still being used like that for
Right.
people in Bartlesville. It's a pretty cool thing.
What's the state of tourism here for Oklahoma and Northeast Oklahoma, but also around the United States? Last year was horrific. We're talking about COVID, virus, everything shutting down. What are you seeing? Things relax a little bit? Are you seeing people starting to stretch their legs and get out more? And
definitely, I think cautiously optimistic would be my description of it. We closed Woolaroc for a year ago during what we thought was the worst of times before the second wave hit. But we were closed for a couple months. During that period of time, we had 3 or 4 days that we opened it up for free drive-throughs, and the public could just drive through the place. We had no idea how that would be received. And until the first Wednesday that we opened it up free of charge for a drive-through, and literally cars were backed up almost all the way to Barnstall, that direction, and back to Bartlesville. And in that first day, we had 9,500 people that drove through here. It was unbelievable. And I think it showed us right then the pent up frustration and of people just wanting to get out.
Right.
And so once we reopened, we reopened with a lot of precautions. We had masks were required, and we had social distancing. But Scott, the crowds were incredible. Our crowds were greater than they were pre-COVID. And I think some of that was we got 3,700 acres to spread out on, and even our museum, the galleries are so huge that people felt safe. But so for Woolaroc, I'm very optimistic in terms of the crowds and what we've got looking forward. But I think for this little piece of the world called Northeast Oklahoma and Osage County and Bartlesville and Pawhuska, literally sky's the limit. I think that what tourism has brought to the financial pockets of Bartlesville and Pawhuska in the last 2 or 3 years has just been terrific. And you couldn't get a motel room in Bartlesville for the last year. The movie had them booked solid.
Mm-hmm.
And
great for the taxes.
Yeah, and better than anything else is that the actors, the high profile people, the Martin Scorsese's, the Robert De Niro's, the Leonardo DiCaprio's, they're going back to New York City and to Los Angeles, and they're saying, we've never been treated so well. You got to go there. If you get a chance to film in Oklahoma, you got to go there. Mm-hmm. And so, hopefully the people in Oklahoma City, our state representatives, our governor, et cetera, continue to understand the real value of those tax credits that are given to these movie people. There's a little bit of frustration of why are we giving this away? My gosh, you look at the numbers, we're giving away $1 and we're recouping $20.
So I mean, that all day long.
Oh, it's huge. And we've got some people in Bartlesville that are driving tourism, and we have people in Pawhuska that are driving tourism. Maria Gus, Kelly Bland in Pawhuska that are dynamic, terrific people, and we're very fortunate. So that's a long way to say I'm optimistic about the tourism. I mean, we get 100,000 guests a year at Woolaroc. And as you said, nobody accidentally finds us. It's a destination that you have to plan for to be, and
right.
So yeah, I'm very excited for what the future holds.
Talk about the movies and the movie that just got through filming, or they may still be filming. I don't know. Killers of the Flower Moon, about the Osage Indians and back in the 20s, and that kind of a thing. I think it's remarkable. Frank Phillips back in the 20s, 30s, whatever, the $1 Million Elm, had a great relationship with the Indians of Northeast Oklahoma and with the Osage. They're actually a huge part of the history of Phillips Petroleum and Woolaroc.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, Frank Phillips was the first white man to be named an honorary chief of the Osage Nation. And that was a very special celebration out here at Woolaroc. The Chief Lookout and Chief Bacon Ryan both presenting Mr. Phillips with that honor. He said, to his dying day, that was the greatest honor he had ever received. The Chief Lookout bestowed upon him an Osage name that was the name of his deceased son. And so it was no greater honor could have been given. And so, during that horrible history of what was going on in the early 1900s to the Osage people, Frank Phillips was just the opposite of that. And, he worked with them, he respected them, and he liked them, and they were good friends of Frank Phillips. Frank was such a unique guy, Scott. He met with presidents of the United States. He met with head of the Catholic Church, but he was equally as comfortable, and maybe more comfortable, sitting down, dealing with the roustabouts, dealing with the outlaws around this part of the state. I mean, he was just a guy that understood people and had a lot of respect for those people. So he lived in a lot of different worlds, but I think that was probably one of his most comfortable.
So here we are now, and you've had 15 years at Woolaroc, and you've done amazing things with the Frank Phillips home and with Woolaroc and in the city of Bartlesville. And this is when's your last?
My last day is October 29th. So heading towards that. I got about 3 weeks left.
Wow. Where do you see, what's the future of Woolaroc? What the next, there's someone else coming in and taking care of things. And so what do you see happening with Woolaroc, with tourism for the next foreseeable future?
I think that as long as the leadership of Woolaroc, first and foremost, has the passion for the history and the story, that the future of Woolaroc is unlimited. I think that we've barely scratched the surface on what technology can bring to the story out here, what technology can bring to the experience of the guest. For so many years, we've been limited because of the fact that, without cell towers, without bandwidth, without Wi-Fi, there are just things we couldn't do. And those things are starting to change. And, I see in the not so distant future, Scott Townsend being able to go through the gallery and looking up at a piece of art, and with your iPhone or earbuds or whatever, that you're listening to the story behind that piece of art and what the artist was thinking as he or she was painting it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think those things are in the near future, and I think that that we've got the opportunity for leadership here that can take a different view of things, maybe a little younger view of things. But my greatest hope, and I've told a lot of people this, is that 2 years from now, I look at something that has happened out here, or something new that has happened out here, and I can just say, dadgummit, why didn't I think of that? That's terrific. I want to see this thing continue to grow, and I wanted to, the biggest shame I've got, disappointment I have, even though 100,000 guests a year is really, really nice. I think that number ought to be 250,000. I think that number ought to be 500,000 a year that are coming out here, and so hopefully the steps can be taken to do that. Again, you just, on one hand, you're trying to vault into the 2021, 2022, and do that in such a way and still retain that feeling of 1925. And as I said before, it's a balancing act. But I think as long as people stay true to the mission of Frank Phillips, and remember what the real purpose is out here, I think I have very, very high expectations of what the future looks like.
Well, I know you've done a great job, seen you around for a long time. We've served on boards together. I know Woolaroc has benefited, the city of Bartlesville has benefited from your efforts and your vision and dreams for not only Bartlesville, but for Woolaroc, and growing Woolaroc to what it is today. And, here's to 250,000, 500,000 visitors before you know it.
You betcha.
Well, any last words from Bob Fraser as the CEO to Bartlesville or to the world?
Not
all
really.
yours.
I just think that I look back on those 15 years and I look back on my last 69 years, and I just almost shake my head at how fortunate I have been, especially these last 15, to be able to do something that I absolutely love. I mean, it's without it sounding trite. I mean, it never was work, and I don't care if you're running Woolaroc or if you're playing on a basketball team or you're working at Phillips Petroleum Company. If I've got two people that are of equal talent and one of them is passionate, I'm putting my money on that passionate person every time, regardless of what they're doing. And I've loved it, and I've been blessed with the opportunity to work with some people out here that are terrific. I've been fortunate to work with a board of trustees that were supportive and encouraging, and it has just been the opportunity of a lifetime. People ask me all the time now, well, what are you going to do now that you're going to retire? And my quick answer is anything I want. But my wife quickly corrects me and says, no, you're not. So it's so we're gonna invent that over the next year or so as to what that future looks like. But I hope to be able to I was doing consulting work is what got me here, and I could see doing some selective, very careful handpicking of things of that type that means something important to me that I feel like I can make a difference in doing. But
right.
But this has been a blessing to be out here, and I feel very fortunate.
I know one project you could take on. I think you should probably take on, and I'm sure people are going to hit you up with all different kind of opportunities and stuff, but you should see that Frank Phillips movie through to completion. I mean, with all the people you've met and know, and they've had a taste of it, that's got to be a great project. Anyway,
yeah,
just my 2 cents.
That would be awesome. I agree. As long as I don't have to play Frank Phillips, find somebody else to play the role. But no, that would be fun. I'd love to be able to see that happen.
Yeah, cool. Well, Bob, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for spending it with us and giving us an overview of where you've come from, what you've done, what Woolaroc's all about. And if you want any more information, if people want to get in touch with you, how do they get in touch with you?
Well, in terms of reaching out to me, the easiest way would be, I'm one of 3 people that still has AOL as a email address. So, Frasertown, FRASERTOWN at AOL.com. My kids just shake their heads and go, Dad, you got to change that. So, but we'll be around. We're going to do some traveling, but Bartlesville's home, and we intend on keeping it that way. So this will be our home base, and we'll work out of here.
Very good. All right. Well, for more information, I'll put links down in the show notes below about Woolaroc and how to get in contact with Bob and how to get in contact with Woolaroc and all of that stuff. Anything that we mentioned in the podcast here, I'll put links down in the show notes below. So anyway, Bob, I appreciate it. Thanks a lot for your time.
Many thanks, Scott. Appreciate it very much.
So for Bob Fraser, this is Scott Townsend. Thanks for watching, listening to the Scott Townsend Show. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you later.
The Scott Townsend Show is a Dietzo Man production. For more episodes, visit the Scott Townsend Show YouTube channel, listen on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.